Oh, morning. Fresh parak. So we're going to learn this Mishnah on Sadi Beis and Aleph, and the Mishnah is not going to be referenced for a while. We're going to say a machlekes and bring a bunch of rayas, and this machlekes amaroyim, and this Mishnah will finally be brought as a raya all the way at the end. Last raya. Hamoicha peris lechaver. Reuben sells peris to Shimon. Vizaron below tzamchay, and Shimon plants them and nothing grows. Bafilu zera pishton, even zera pishton, flaxseed, right? Flaxseed is used to grow pishton, but it's also not for me, but certain types of crunchy vegans maybe will put flaxseed on their yogurt, on their acai bowl. It's a thing that you're looking at me like you never heard of it. People eat flaxseed, but it's not typical. Regular, I don't think men eat it. So the question is something that if Reuben sells something to Shimon and it doesn't grow, it seems, I'm not sure exactly why, but Reuben is responsible. If Shimon was intending to use it to grow, to plant it and grow more its flax seeds, and it's not fertile, it's Reuben's responsibility. I guess it must be that it was bad. It was bad seed. It was a bad seed. It didn't have the capability of growing. So, like wheat, when someone buys wheat, then it's a much more 50-50 proposition, whether the person wants to use it to plant or he wants to eat it. He wants to grind it up and make it to flour. Flaxseed, it's 90-10. 90% of people want to use it to grow flax. They can make it into linen. But there's 10% who want to eat it. In either case, even if it's a case when almost everyone wants to plant it, even so, Ruvain is not chayav b'achri. And as the Gemara is going to explain is because we don't care about the roiv. The roiv is not relevant in a case of mamonis. We go after the muchzak. If you're trying to get your money back from Ruvain, Shimon's going to get money back from Ruvain as long as there's a possibility. When Reuben sold it to Shimon, that Shimon wanted to eat it. So if he eats it, it doesn't make a difference whether it has a capability of growing. And then it turns out Shimon tried to use it as seed and it didn't work. Reuben's not responsible. Shimon cannot take money. He cannot be mitzi mammon. He can't take away money from Reuben because of a right. Shimon Gamliel Eimer, and that question of whether you can take away money based on a roiv, whether you can take from a muchzak based on a roiv, is going to be a machlekes amaroy. If Shimon Gamliel Eimer, zaruna gina she'ein nechalim, the seeds for a garden, which are not eaten at all, there's no possibility that they're going to be eaten. Chayav b'achri yusuf. When Reuben sold to Shimon, he knew that Shimon was going to use it for planting, and even so, he sold him bad seeds. Then Reuben is going to have to give back the money that he got for the seeds because it wasn't useful for the only purpose that it was sold for. The Gemara later on is going to explain whether Reb Shimon Gamliel is being chaylik on the first part of the Mishnah or explaining the first part of the Mishnah. It's just clarifying that it's true what you said when you're talking about wheat, or even if you're talking about pishton, which is almost always planted, that then the Mishnah says, the Tanakama says that the seller is not responsible. But Rav Shimon Gamliel is clarifying. But if it's only used for planting, then Einachanami, the seller is going to have to reimburse the purchaser for selling him a seed that wasn't effective. It's not a roiv, it's a vade. Now we're going to go back and say that this is a machlekes amaroyim. Itma hamoicha sholach haveri. If a seller sold to a buyer a shar, and then it turns out that the shar that he sold him was formerly used in the bullfights in Spain, and it was not an animal that could be used to plow his fields. It's too wild. It's going to be destructive, and its only use is to be slaughtered and eaten. So Rav Amar is a mekach tais. Rav says it's a mekach tais. He can go back. The buyer can go back to the seller and say, "Listen, most people who buy a cow, who buy an ox, they intend to use it to plow with. There's only the leftover oxen that are no longer good, or for whatever reason, or they're a nakhan, that you go slaughter them. But first, you usually use them for plowing, and they're more valuable for plowing normally." So he says, "It's a mekach tais. It's not what I bought it for. I didn't want to send it to be slaughtered." Shmuel says no. He says the seller could say, "Oh, I thought you wanted it for shchita." You say there's a roiv, so the Gemara is going to get on Amud Beis. We're going to say that there's no roiv on an isser on a mamonis to take away money. You can't take away from a muhzik based on a roiv. It's a very strange thing, right? We all know that. We go after a roiv, we follow the roiv, right? And everything, all throughout Shas, it's a pasuk acher Rav and lahatas. We follow a roiv. That's the rule. A majority, it tells us what's going to be. But Shmuel's svara is that that's only if in Isurim, and this is the Mefarshim explain why that is the case. But in Mamonis, we don't go bust to the roiv. I mean, obviously, if you have a roiv and they're both, the money is not by either one of them, then the roiv can dictate. But if Shimon is going back to Reuven, if the purchaser is going to the seller and saying, give me the money that I paid you," so he's trying to be Maitzi Mammon, you can't use a roiv to do that. That's the machlekes Rav and Shmuel. So now the Gemara first wants to short circuit this whole discussion. What are we saying? It depends on this question of whether you go after a roiv by Mammon. We can determine with certainty about what the seller's intentions were when he sold it. If it's a person who is selling it to a butcher, then obviously the intention was, if Reuben was selling it to Shimon, and Shimon was a butcher, so Reuben had in mind that he was selling it to be geshachten. So certainly then Shimon can't, he's standing there with the cleaver and his apron on, he says, "Oh, I wanted to plow it, so I'm bringing it back." No, you're a butcher, so we all knew when it was sold, that was what the intention was. Ilaraj, and if the guy is a farmer in his overalls and his pitchfork, then he was selling it for plowing. So then then certainly the seller has no ability to contend to say that he intended it for shchita. It was clear from the circumstances what it was intended for. It was intended to be used for plowing. So Gemara says, so why do Rav and Shmuel argue about this? Let's look at what the circumstances are. So for the Gemara, no. We're talking about where the purchaser did both. He had a big complex, he had a farm, but he also had a slaughterer. He had a sheikhet on his farm. So it could be that the ox was being bought for one or for the other. So therefore, and the roiv is it's normally bought for plowing, and that's what the machlekes says. Do we follow the roiv? Once it tries again, as the Rashbam says, if a cow that's bought for plowing is worth 20, you always have the option to shecht. So shecht, an animal that's going to be only capable of being slaughtered, is worth less. It has less options. You can only slaughter it, so that's worth 10. And the one that's used for plowing could either be for plowing, you could always shecht it, that's worth 20. So let's look, how much money did the purchaser pay? If he paid 20, then obviously he intended to plow with it. Now he should be able to, and it turns out that it's a nakh and it's not capable of plowing, he should be able to go back to the seller and ask for his money back. We're talking about a circumstance where, before Pesach, before Yom Tov, meat is very expensive. So when you buy a cow, whether you're buying it for plowing or for slaughtering, it's the same price because everyone's looking for meat. If that's the case, what are they arguing about? Right? We're talking about whether the purchaser can go back to him and say, "I want my money back, here's your cow." What difference does it make to the to the purchaser. Let him keep the cow. He could go sell it for 20. It's the same money. It's worth the same much whether it's a nachan or not, because whether you're using it for slaughtering or for plowing, it's the same money. So let him just go sell it to someone else. Why does he have to go bother with this court case to get the sale undone? So come on, Nafkamina is he doesn't want to go to the marketplace to sell it. He wants to go back, get his warranty, give me my money back. I don't want to deal with this. So hey Chida, what's the case? We have another point. If does this Ruvain, the seller, does he have the cash? Right? Shimon is going to him, the purchaser is going to the seller and saying, I want my money back. I paid $20 for it, and I really wanted to plow with it. It's not capable of plowing because it's a non-cut. So I want my $20 back, and I don't want to bother finding someone else to sell it to. So what's the case? If this person, the seller, has the money in his pocket to pay him, he has the cash. He hasn't already spent the money on something else. Liakov Tura Bezuze. If he doesn't have the money, if he doesn't have the money to pay him back, Liakov Tura Bezuze. The purchaser is not going to be interested in returning it to him and saying, now you owe me $20 to pay sometimes later. He'd rather keep the cow, because at least then the ox, then he has something that's worth $20. Dami and she, min mari rishusach ba'ari afra. From someone who owes you money, you'll take even afra, even the subin, even the lowest grade of grain. Means if someone owes you money and they're willing to pay you in any form something that's worth the value of the debt, better than just having the guy owe you money, take whatever he's willing to give you. Even if it's something that's not so fungible, it's not so easy to dispose of, but better off having a box of brand rather than just having a note to the guy who doesn't have anything. Then he'll sell the brand and you won't get anything. So you're always better off. A bird in the hands is worth two in the bush. You take the subin. So the same thing over here. If the guy doesn't have money, the purchaser is going to just keep the cow. So it's not relevant. Why are we talking about whether he can return it or not? He's not going to want to return. Our answer is no. It's talking about where he has the cash, and that's the reason why he wants to make a place. It's a very strange masuman. Like, what are we talking about? He doesn't have money. Well, who says? Why would we assume someone doesn't have money? Maybe people just didn't have so much money those days. So now the Gemara is finally, after we tried all these ways to short circuit the discussion, the Gemara explains what's the machlekes between Rav and Shmuel on this case. What's the reasons why Rav says it's a mekach tois? Rav amaharez a mekach tois. So Rav says in this case where the seller sold an animal, an ox, that turned out to be a nanchan, the purchaser can go back to the seller and get his money back because it's a mekach tois. You go basaruba. Most oxen are used for plowing, and this animal is not capable of plowing, so therefore it's a mekach tois. Beruba l'radia zabni, since go basarayv, and most oxen are used for plowing. Shmuelach ki azlina basaruba bi'isura. That's only by isur. Let's say the Rashbam gives the example, right? If you have 10 pieces of meat and 9 of them are kosher, and one of them is not kosher, you can assume if you took one of them that it was a kosher one. But by mama we don't go basar raiv, and we have to let's see the Rashbam 5 lines from the bottom of the narrow lines, which has the important caveat le'azlin basaruba ela achar mochzak in yesh lo shum taina. We don't go basaroiv, but there's 2 important rules. It has to be we don't go basaroiv, but rather we go after the muhsa. That means over here, in our case, the purchaser is trying to take money away from the seller. So there he can't. The roiv is not enough to take money away. But if you have a roiv and you're the muhsa, certainly that would be helpful to you. And also you have to have a taina. It has to be. You have to be able to say, it's because I didn't think I was buying it to use to plow. But if it's clear, like we said in the Gemara, all the things, if it's talking about someone who is only a butcher. So then he doesn't really have a time to say, I was planning to buy it for plow. No one would expect that's what you're doing. So now the Gemara is going to be Simin Isha ve'evid shar shurin uperis. And have 5 rayas, one with the other. And the last one is Paris, is the raya from our Mishnah. We're finally going to get back. Meisvei. Ha'isha shen is almana in this garshin. A woman who became a widow or she was divorced. V'ai meres psula nisasi. And she says, when we got married, I was a psula, and therefore my ksuba is 200 zuz. V'hu aimer. Obviously, Rashbam explains V'hu aimer is talking about only on the case of nisgarsha, not nisalmana. He wouldn't be able to say anything. Right? Fair argument, or it means the note. Left the note. You should just know that she wasn't the psula. Loy, he says no. Ki ala almana nesaticha. When I married you, you were an almana. Im yesh edim sheyatza behinuma b'roisha perua. If there are edim that can testify that at the time of the marriage, of this marriage, this current marriage, that the husband now is divorcing her, that she went out with the veil that indicates that you only have a veil for a first marriage, and she was wearing her hair out. Her hair wasn't covered because she was a psula at the time. So basa masayim. If you have edim, then that disproves the husband's contention, and it proves that she was a psula, and therefore she's entitled to 200 zuz. So the only reason is that the Gemara makes a inference. The only reason why he has to pay 200 is because there are edim that say that she was a psula. Allah edim, light. Without edim, we would say she doesn't get 200. She only gets 100 because she's a moitzi mechaveret. According to Shmuel, according to Rav, who says we do go after Rav even by mamnas, let's go after the Rav Nashim. The Rav Nashim psulisness. Most women, when they get married, are psulis. Right? And at least that was back in the Jewish world, and back in the day. Back in the day, even it was probably a Rav that didn't just apply in the Jewish world; it applied in the entire world. So Amar Ravina. So l'chayra, it's a kasha on Rav. We're not going basarai. She has to bring an aid that says that there were indications that she was a psula. But without that, we wouldn't go. Just the roy would not be enough for her to be able to take 200 zuz as opposed to 100 zuz to be mitzimah. Amravina mishum de'ikalamema roiv nashim psulas nisses umiyat almanas. There is a roiv that are psulas, but there's also a miyat almanas. But anyone who gets married as a psula, that's a well-known fact in the community, right? There's 200 people living in the whole town. Whenever there's a chassan, everyone gets invited to the chassan. Everyone knows this is a first marriage, so they know everyone knows she's a psula. V'zul hoil ve'ein la koil. But this woman, now she's showing up, and there's no edim that say she's a psula. There's 2 guys who happen to remember, was she wearing a veil or was she wearing braid, but they don't even remember if she was a psula. They just remember these indications. But besides these 2 guys who happen to remember a detail about the wedding, they don't remember that she was a psula. They don't remember if she was married beforehand or not. So where's the koil? So Israel Aruba. So this is not a good roiv. It's true it's a roiv that roiv nashim apsulas, but there's an indication that she wasn't psula from the fact that nobody remembers it. If she was an almana and she got married, nobody taka would remember. That's not such a big deal. An almana, it's a shtil azach. People don't go to those weddings, so there wouldn't be anyone. They do a minyan in the back. It's not surprising. There's no edim about whether she was a almana, but the fact that she was a psula and nobody remembers it, that seems to be indicative that there's something fishy over here, that she's not really a psula. So it's not really a roiv. So this is not a kasha on Rav. So Dr. Mari, kol hanisas, if every single woman who gets married as a psula, yeshlan kol, there's always a kol. Every single person is married, and there's always going to be 100 edim available that could say that she was a psula. Ki Edim Mayavi. What does it help that we have Edim that remember that she was wearing a veil, or that she was coming out with her hair uncovered? These Edim are obviously lying, or the way I would put it is they're making a mistake. I'm more charitable than the Gemara. I would say they thought that she was wearing her hair out, but it was really an excellent shaitel, and they just made a mistake, or they forgot, whatever the case is. Or they're lying. But the fact that if we're trying to say that their indication is going connected at a koil, which is an anand sadi, which is an absolute truth, that every time there's a wedding of a psula, everyone knows about it, and now all of a sudden there's only two guys, and they don't even know that they're going against that koil. We should not trust them. It's Adam. It's basically Adam connected Adam. I don't think it would mean that we would say that they're Adam, that they're going to be puzzle for Adis. But we would say that they're Adam, that it's two Adam against two Adam, essentially. In Anand Sadi, when we have something that is a very strong presumption in one way, that can contradict the Adam. And it should be left that we don't have Adis one way or the other. If we don't have Adis on the other, then we leave the money by the muhsik, by the husband. The Gemara says, no, that's not a taina. It's not that every single time there's a psula gets married, there's a couple. It's most of the time. There's some, guys who are they live on the edge of town, and they make a wedding. They just have a couple of friends that come to it. They're not very popular, so it could be someone who's a psula gets married, and there's most of the time there's going to be a call, but it's not enough of a presumption. It's not enough of an anand sadi to say that the Edom are lying. So Einachanami, the fact that if the Edom come and testify, that is enough to make it that she's going to get 200. The zuhoil vein lakal is solaruba, but it's still enough. But the fact that there's not a koil, the lack of a koil is not enough to say that it will overcome the Edom and say that the Edom are lying. But it is enough since there's no koil that there's not going to be a roiv to tell you that she should get the 200. So you do need to have the Edom, in spite of the fact, because there's no koil, because there's no Edom. You do have to have Edom coming to testify, because otherwise we'd say there's no roiv here, because the roiv is deteriorated, the roiv is degraded by the absence of a koil. Toshma. If you remember, there are some places, first of all, that had a minute not to have a ksuba at all. They didn't have a written ksuba. We came across this, I guess, back in ksubas. There were places that have that. Some places had wrote a ksuba, some places didn't. I don't remember the reasons why. I think it's because I think the reason is because then she'll claim that she lost the ksuba, collect the ksuba, and then produce the ksuba and collect twice. Or it could just be a place where she doesn't have, she says, I lost the ksuba. I was a psul, but I lost the ksuba. And she says, but I still want 200 because everyone agrees I was married. It's not disputable. Everyone knows that. And Roiv Nashim are psulas, so I want the $200. The ksuba is a raya. It's not, like, I say it is a chiyuv, as you know, this, right? The Gemara brings that a person man's not allowed to live with his wife without the ksuba. Right. It is halacha, right? It's quoted in the Gemara. It's halacha. But she says, I lost it. Now they're getting divorced or he's dying. It doesn't make a difference anymore that she doesn't have the ksuba as far as them living together. That's not relevant anymore. The only question is her raya, whether she has a proof that she's owed 200. It's not in dispute that they were married and they're divorcing. So she's owed the money. So there's a whole Gemara about this. Then if she does this, if she says, I lost the ksuba, does she have to write a receipt to him to show that she already got paid? When she paid, let's say he pays her the 200. Well, who's to say she's not going to produce the ksuba next week and say, here's my ksuba, you owe me $200. So she has to, she has to write to the husband the receipt saying she already received the ksuba. Another writer, Toshma. Someone who sold an evet to his friend, an imtzaganev, and it turns out that if the Eved is a thief, or he confused him, or he's a kidnapper, he give the purchaser. That's what he has. You bought a thief. You bought a kidnapper. It's too bad. That's what when you buy a slave, that's the that's the risk you take, and you can't return it. List him mizuyim, but if it turns out that the slave, the Eved, is a armed robber, a muchtav lamalchus, or he's already sentenced to die for his past misdeeds. In that case, the purchaser can tell him that, listen, I'm not interested. That's not what I bought. I wanted to buy a usable slave. This guy is going to get killed with his armed robberies, or he's sentenced to die. It's useless. So Resha my timer. Why is it that in the Resha, in the case where he's just a regular thief, a pickpocket or a kidnapper, which is, I guess, it wasn't looked on as such a terrible thing. My time, la mishum deruba hachiyisnu. Is it not because most avodim you could assume that they don't have the highest moral standards, and this is typical when you buy an eved, that this is what you get. So when you bought him, that's what you understood. So l'chayra, it's a raya that we say we go bus a roiv even by malchus. Why can't the purchaser say, I don't care? Like according to Shmuel, let's say it doesn't make a difference that it's a roiv. The seller can tell him, you don't go bus a roiv to take away money. So l'chayra, it is a raya that because it's a roiv, the seller can reject him. So that's like Shmuel. It's like, well, it's not even a suffix. This is not a roiv. This is 100%. All avodim are thieves. They have nothing to lose. What's going to happen? You're going to sell them into avdus? They already are avodim, right? That's the rule. If someone steals, they have to go into, they get sold for to pay back for 6 years. Guy's got nothing to lose. No, we're not talking about it. You're right. I'm just adding some color. But the bottom line is, someone who's an eved has nothing to lose. What's going to happen to him if he steals?
Most form of society.
I say he's walking. He's going to jump over the whatever the fair thing, the stuff, the turnstile, right? He's going to jump over the turnstile. What's going to happen to him? They're going to throw him in jail. They'll be a vacation for an eved.
Kidnapping, that's something else.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's strange. Like, why would? That's what it says. Kvustius goyim nefashos. I don't know. To me, it's like a very serious crime. It's hard to understand how you could say every single eved is a goyim nefashos. That's what the Gemara is saying. Right. So the Taisus argues. Kvustius pirshash b'chol makom goyim nefashos. V'hachol mashmachi. The master kula hachiyisnu. Otu kula gami nefashos ninu. That's what Taisus asks. How could it be that every eved is a kidnapper? Yeah. I don't know. It means a gambler. So that's a more reasonable shot.
Kubya means cubes?
Yeah, correct. Dice. Okay, we'll stop over here, I guess, and hope to get a little further. Okay, can't complain. We did our